Welcome to episode 531 of the Autoblog podcast. I'm Greg Migliori and this is Joel Stocksdale joining me today in studio. We've got a big show coming up for you today. Lots of good stuff. Of course, the Tokyo Motor Show is going on. We've got SEMA coming up just on the horizon. He went to Germany and saw the new Audi A7. Lots of cool stuff. Let's just jump right in. Really big show, and I think we're all excited about it. Want to reach out to you guys, though, if you're watching either on our site, that's great. If you're watching on Facebook, also great. Please shoot us some questions. If you want to know something a little bit more about what we're talking about, you have some follow-ups, hey, reach out to us. We're definitely all of that stuff on Facebook, and we want to hear from you. So please let us know. So let's jump right into the 2019 Audi A7. What an awesome car. You traveled halfway around the world to see it. Tell me just what were your initial impressions right when you saw this car?
Well, it's definitely an attractive vehicle. It's, I'd say, a worthy successor to the A7. I don't know if it's, I go back and forth deciding whether or not I like it better or worse than the previous one.
Okay.
Like a lot of German cars, it's a somewhat conservative refresh. They didn't rewrite the rule book on this thing. It's still very much the fastback hatch, kind of corporate design all the way through. It's got a front end that looks kind of like an A8. But overall, it's still really attractive. Looks like they've emphasized more the wheel arches and the fenders. They look a little bit more accentuated and muscular. Probably the coolest thing on them are the headlights and the taillights. They've done a lot of work on getting the LEDs on, and the taillight has this really cool sequence that happens when you fire it up. The bar along the bottom, it lights up from the center, lights all the way up, and then it sends a little sequence of one light going across each side. Wow. And then it fills up fully. It's a neat little sequence.
I think the A7 has always been one of the design statements for Audi. It really shows off, how they think, their sedan language should look. Of course, the A8 is the flagship, but there's just something about the A7 that really does it for me. I think it's, to your point, that fastback roofline, that looks sweet. If it were me, if I were going to spend this kind of money on a large Audi, I would definitely probably go with the A7 as opposed to the A8. I just think, they nail all the little styling cues right in that silhouette. It really stands out. It's different than the A8. It's different than the A6. It's different than BMW and Mercedes. When I see an A7 on the road, I'm excited. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, and the interior is pretty sharp too. It's got, again, the interior is very much inspired by the A8. It's got this big black panel it's got a big touchscreen in the middle, touchscreen below that. There's no physical interface anymore for the infotainment, so there's no little wheel for controlling things. It's all touch now. But
how do you feel about that?
I'm mixed. I mean, I worry about touchscreen stuff, but one thing that makes me a little bit more optimistic for this is that, I assume that this is the same in the A8, is that when you touch the screen, you can set it up so that it doesn't immediately go to the function that you just clicked on. You have to give it a little pressure and you feel a little click, you hear a little click, and then it goes to the function. So if you accidentally tapped the wrong thing, you're not committed, you don't have to go back, you can just move your finger over and try again. Yeah.
Audi's really, I think, been on the cutting edge with, virtual cockpit and just, their interior, instruments in general. They have not been afraid to take risks, try some new things. So I'm excited to see how this works. I can't wait to drive this car. Yeah, that's the A7. Really exciting vehicle. You went to Germany. I'm sure you had a great time. It's just after Oktoberfest there. What's one thing about this car that you picked up there that you wouldn't know by looking at the videos or reading the press releases?
One thing that I picked up there that you might not notice in person. That's a good question. I don't know something right off the bat.
Yeah. Well, maybe, I think what's great is the headlights and the taillights. To me, those are Audi signature cues. I initially, just looking at the pictures, maybe in real life they look different. I don't know. But, I was like, wow, those things look great. And they evolve sort of that signature Audi design cue. So, I don't know. How'd they look in real life?
Yeah, I will say there's a lot more depth and three-dimensional shape to the lights in person that you might not pick up on pictures. Like you can tell that like it's not flat. There's like crevices and angles and stuff that you might not pick up on.
Nice. That's cool. And who knows, maybe Audi race cars will have them in the future too, you know. That's top work from Joel Stocksdale, who went to Germany, so you didn't have to see the new Audi A7. Moving along, we've got Budweiser and Lyft are partnering to basically offer a pretty unique ride-sharing service. Prohibition-era cars, kind of makes sense. I think that's a bit of Budweiser's actually advertising campaigns lately is they're rolling out a beer that harks back to that time. It's an amber ale. So I'm sure this is all linked together, drink Budweiser, but don't drive. It's, a beer from the 30s, a recipe from, 70, 80 years ago. And then, hey, if you have a beer from that era, why not roll around in a car from that era, I guess.
Yeah, it sounds like the perfect opportunity to throw on your pinstripe suit and take a spin to your local speakeasy, but leave the Tommy guns at home.
Exactly. I think you want to definitely leave the Tommy guns at home. It's, I don't know, it seems like a great chance to get in a really cool car, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of wonder, it would be interesting if they expand this program a little bit and have some carts with draft horses taking you around to places.
And the pilot program it's a limited area right now, right? Just New York, I think.
I think so.
Yeah, it's not widespread exactly, but you guys should bring it to Detroit. You might not know that Detroit was like the capital of Prohibition. People used to, like, the river would freeze, and people would, like, import and export liquor right over the Detroit River into Canada. There's a lot of old Model Ts at the bottom of the Detroit River right now that were, kind of, they didn't make it. They didn't make it to the other side. Mm-hmm. So, interesting partnership. I think that's just a fun little story. You want to know the whole deal, go to autoblog.com. Of course, we've got that. We've got his A7 story, but, you should check it out for some more details there. Moving things along, the SEMA preview. You are going to be out there next week. Mm-hmm. You are, it's basically there's one press day, and for those of you watching at home, SEMA is a custom car show. If you're one of our core readers, you know it, you love it. If you're just kind of maybe getting into this for the first time, tuners do everything to these cars. It's like crazy exhausts, bigger engines, smaller engines, crazy paint jobs, but it's also a good place to get a sense of trends in the industry. I think that was one of the first places we saw matte paint. We saw black wheels out there before you saw them, on every street corner right now. And, I think we're going to look for a number of things. I'm excited about the Camaros, the Mustangs. We always see a big selection of those. Some of the Ford stuff, like the Mustangs, of course, but the Focus hatchbacks, the Fiestas. And you've never been. Imagine you're excited.
I've actually been once.
One time, okay.
But I'm excited to go back. It's always an amazing thing. The Las Vegas Convention Center is huge, and SEMA takes up the vast majority of it, inside and out. And it's just custom cars and parts as far as you can see. There are going to be some pretty interesting things, like you mentioned, the Mustangs and Focuses and things. Something else that I'm excited to see, Hyundai and Kia always have some interesting cars there.
They do some cool things, yeah.
Yeah, and one of them that I'm really interested to look at is the Bisimoto Hyundai Ioniq. It's not like Bisimoto is known for incredibly ridiculously overpowered cars. They built a 1,000 horsepower Honda Odyssey with a manual transmission.
Why wouldn't you do that, right?
They built a 1,000 horsepower rear drive, either Santa Fe or Tucson. But they do a lot of that stuff. But this Ioniq, they've gone for high fuel economy. It's got carbon fiber wheels and low rolling resistance tires. It's got skirts over the rear wheels for better aerodynamics. They claim that they can get 80 miles per gallon out of it.
That is a very forward-looking concept. If you want to know more about SEMA, like I said, Joel will be there for the second time. Press conferences are early next week. All the automakers are there. Again, like we were talking about Ford and Chevy, Toyota, FCA, they do awesome things. That usually comes later in the day with like the Wranglers, Hyundai and Kia for sure. Don't forget Lexus. They do a lot of really cool stuff, big wheels, some interesting takes on that spindle grill. So come back to us next week, and the tail end of this week, I'm sure we'll have lots more of the previews and lots of cool stuff. SEMA is fun. I have been Wow, 7 or 8 times at least. It's quite the show. It's a lot of fun. But yeah, be sure to follow Joel on Twitter and check us out for all that coverage. It's going to be fun. It's a fun show.
Yeah.
I mean, it's in Vegas. It's part of the industry where like just that passion comes through. So lots of cool stuff. And come back to us next week for that. But for this week, right now, Tokyo Motor Show. Want to give everybody a heads up if you're watching at home. Tomorrow, you got to come back here, 10 o'clock Eastern time, Tokyo special. We're going to have everything, break it all down. We're going to analyze it. We're going to argue about it. But for right now, some of the press conferences have wrapped up. We're just going to tell you a little bit about some of the early returns, if you will. What stood out to you here on day one of the Tokyo Motor Show?
Well, this Tokyo show has been big. There's been a lot of really cool stuff. Obviously, one of the big things that jumped out at me is the Honda Sports EV concept.
Sure.
It's the follow-up to the urban EV concept that they showed in Frankfurt. It's low, it's rakish, it's sporty. It's really cool. I like it a lot.
I'm liking the Evo concept. I wrote that story this morning. It was a little bit of a brain recalibration for me. Like, we all knew the Evo electric crossover was coming. Mm-hmm. And this morning it really happened. Like, to me that was like, wow, I loved the Evo sedan. I loved driving it. It was one of the first press cars, the old one, that I ever drove. So I was one of those people that was having a hard time getting to this new evolution of the Evo, if you will. But I like how it looks. I think it looks pretty solid.
Yeah, I was surprised. I mean, I'm not a crossover fan, but it does look pretty good. It's really angular, it's sleek. And I'm trying to be optimistic about it, that maybe Mitsubishi can make like a sporty crossover that'll win me over. I mean, Nissan had the Juke Nismo and that was kind of fun. Hopefully maybe Mitsubishi can make me like crossovers a little more.
I mean, for me, this is like they're just putting their best foot forward. They're like, what's our strongest name? Evo. We're going to call it that. What do people want? They want crossovers. What do they want powering those crossovers? Maybe not this second, but in the next 5 to 10 years, they want electric powertrains. So Mitsubishi is just like, they're literally taking all of their chips, everything. They're going all in on this car. And to me, this is how they could get stronger in the United States is, people see this crossover. They're like, wow, what is that thing? That's cool. Oh, it's a Mitsubishi. I remember that. Okay. And frankly, they sell so few cars here right now that there's nowhere to go but up. There's not a lot of, I would say, negative perception because people aren't necessarily turned, all that off or on by some of their cars.
Yeah, there's just not really a perception about Mitsubishi.
Right. I think their profile is lowered so much in the last decade that, this is a great chance to sort of just hit the reset button. Yeah. Really cool coverage out of Tokyo. We hope you're following along. We got lots of follow-ups coming today. All the galleries, all of our wrap-up stuff. It's a really great time right now if you're a car enthusiast because these shows are just coming back to back to back. And, it's auto show season. It literally leads up into the holiday season. It's a little festive around here, I guess.
Yeah.
So auto show season, again, reminder, come back to Autoblog tomorrow, 10 o'clock Eastern time. We're going to break down the Tokyo Motor Show, everything you need to know, and, it's going to be great. So be sure to come back for that, for yet another Autoblog live stream. It's 10 o'clock Eastern time. You're like, come on, you don't want to do work at that time. That's when you snack, you get some oatmeal, West Coast, you're probably just waking up, have us on in the background. Don't miss it. It's going to be a good show. Moving along, though, what have we been driving? We've had some cool cars coming through the fleet. I spent a bit of time in the Toyota 4Runner. Talk about old vehicles. The 4Runner has been around a while. Yeah. It's a blocky, old school SUV. It's a true SUV. There's no crossover here. It's an SUV. It rides like one. It's tuned for off-road. It basically looks kind of like a 1990s SUV, if you will. But yeah, I really enjoyed my weekend in it.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to drive it yet, but the 4Runner, it's a neat truck because it's part of a dying breed. It's still body on frame. It's traditional SUV. I think it's still got a live axle in the back for it's got traditional part-time four-wheel drive with low range. Does this one have the fancy like crawl control type stuff on it?
It does, yeah. So if that's what you want to do, I had no reason to do that. That's what you can do. Excuse me, and it really stands out too. There's just not many vehicles that are, styled like this anymore. It's like blocky, like 1990s Ford Explorer styling. And I love that. It's one of those things where, like every time I got in there, I was like, I feel like you can see really well out of it. You're higher than almost everybody. It's a lot to turn, but there was just like, I put all the windows down. You could roll the back window down, which is cool. Like there's a button. You should have this great sort of like wind tunnel greenhouse effect. The weather is still nice here in Detroit. So yeah, it was cool. I really like that vehicle.
If I'm not mistaken, I think that roll-down rear window has been a feature on 4Runners for like decades. I think back in like the early 90s, and I think maybe even a little bit in the 80s, you could get that
it's cool.
roll-down window. Yeah.
I like it. The one we drove here came in at, it was about $40,000, which actually I think is a pretty good deal when you consider just how much a Tahoe costs these days, or even the Wrangler adds up pretty quickly. So, we had a lot of stuff on it, cloth seats, but, it had the TRD trim on it, so that looked pretty good. The last time I drove one of these before, I actually took it to this kind of like party thing in, for like a weekend sort of camping thing. Everybody loved it. It's like you're not neutral on the 4Runner. You see it and you love it, or you're like, whoa, that's not what I'm looking for. It's almost 2018. I don't want that thing. So it's cool.
Yeah, and at that price, I mean, like you could even option up a lot of crossovers to that price too. I mean, Dodge Durango, Ford Explorer, things like that, and they won't go places where the 4Runner will.
It's very capable. The only off-roading I really did is I was at this kind of Halloween event on Friday, and I had to park on the grass. To get to the grass, you had to jump a curb that was pretty tall. It was pretty tall.
You mean you didn't use crawl control for that?
I didn't use crawl control for that, and I just kind of like eased right up. The only concern was I was like, that's cement. I don't want to catch anything. But there's so much ground clearance. The suspension is just so like, tuned to softly roll over everything. It was cool. So that's the 4Runner. If you have any questions about the 4Runner, for those of you following along at home, let us know. Hit us up on Facebook. Reach out to us. We want to hear from you. If you want to know more about what I did in this old school Toyota, that's cool. Questions about Tokyo, Prohibition era drinks, I guess, and then what to drink and then get in the lift. We want to hear from you. This is your chance to respond. Hit us up. Other car we drove is the opposite of a 4Runner. I would call it, maybe not the polar opposite, but it's different. The 27 Cadillac ATS-V. What a rocket ship.
Yeah, it's fast and it's fun. I took it to lunch earlier this week.
It's a good lunch.
Yeah. And there's a lot that I like about it. I was actually, one thing I was surprised at, the V6, and it's a twin turbo V6, and it actually sounds pretty solid.
Like, it does.
Yeah, it's got kind of a snarly note to it. Not too loud, but not too quiet either. And yeah, it's fast. I mean, even outside of boost, it's not slow.
Yeah, I drove it I drove it in touring, I drove it in sport. There's no reason to throw it in track, but yeah, I mean, it's a fun car. It's, the one we had has, it was all blacked out. It had the tan interior, and it looks so mean. There's something about the design of that car too. Like, I think the ATS is like, it's just like that ripped, like just like old school fighter jet look of a car that even you don't see in the CT6 or the CTS. Like, it's something about the smaller dimensions make this car look just a little more severe. It looks intense. That would be the word to describe it. It sounds so good. Transmission's pretty good. That twin turbo V6 is brilliant. Honestly, I was asking Reese the other day, another one of our associate editors here, I'm like, what engine is in this thing? And he's like, it's got the twin turbo V6. And I'm like, I forgot that was in this car. So that made me even more excited to drive it. Seats are bolstered. The steering's pretty heavy. It's a lot of fun. And I guess the only downside is that, Cadillac's kind of moving away from these like German fighting sports sedans, and they're going to like consolidate into like one or two sedans and then basically go crossover everything.
Yeah, and I mean, I understand why, because sedans just aren't selling like they used to, and rear drive sedans are expensive, front drive based crossovers are cheap, and they sell like hotcakes. I mean, Buick has had amazing sales lately, and their whole lineup is basically crossovers at this point. They've got the Regal and LaCrosse as
and
like
the
sedans.
Convertible, the Cascada,
Oh,
which is
yeah.
not a sedan, but it's a car.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of where the industry's heading. You know, it's people want to ride a little higher up. They want to have that idea that they can open the hatch and throw stuff in. Even though the trunk in some of these Cadillacs, not the ATS, but the CTS is pretty big. You know, a Dodge Charger trunk, I mean, talk about, you know, how many bodies you could put in the back of those cars. I mean, these are big trunks, but people don't want sedans anymore. They want these crossovers.
Yeah, and it's a shame because this ATS is a lot of fun. And how you're talking about the smaller dimensions making it look really cool and athletic and sporty, it also makes it really nice. I mean, it's really nice to drive. It's compact and it's easy to maneuver. It feels a lot quicker and nimble and more nimble than a lot of other vehicles. Even the CTS-V, that thing was the one that we had recently. That's a big car.
That's an aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
This one though, like, I mean, I was blown away how, like, you know, you're taking corners. You know, it's Tokyo Day, so we were up early coming into the office. It's still dark here because daylight savings times hasn't kicked in. I was like ripping around corners, you know, drinking coffee. It's a great way to wake up. It was actually pretty cold, and this is a rear-wheel drive car, so I was trying to mind my manners a little bit because the road is cold and it's starting to get a little slippery here.
And that engine will break it loose.
That engine will break it loose. So yeah, I mean, so here's the thing. Cadillac hasn't confirmed exactly what they're going to do with these. If there's any chance, Cadillac, Mr. Dinishin, you could keep some of these cars around, that would be a great thing to do, I think. But, you know, hey, you got to pay the bills too. So, great car, great week in the fleet here at Autoblog. If you have any questions, shoot them to us here. We want to hear from you. Video clip of the week. This is pretty cool. We sent Jesse and Patrick to France for the Passage de Gois. I think I'm saying that right. It's not de Gois, it's de Gois.
I'm not a French pronunciation specialist, so I'm going to defer to you on this.
I'm a tiny bit French, so I think that gives me just a little bit of authority to, you know, just pronounce these words how I choose. They basically went to this place where the road is fully submerged all the time, but there's a brief part of the day where you can get through. So it's pretty cool. You got to check this out. Let's have a look here at this teaser video. You're going to want to come back and watch the whole thing. It's a great video.
We're losing some road.
Here, I'll drive in it just to make you feel like
Yeah, there we go. Action.
water's all the way across the road.
Okay, cool. Yeah, this is definitely happening now.
Look how quick that's coming in.
Oh, yeah.
It's like coming in
Oh,
fast.
yeah. Yeah.
It's time to really go to work right now because it's coming quick.
I now can completely understand how somebody gets in trouble out here. The sense of urgency and danger is present.
Ah, it's back. Oh, yeah.
This is literally, guys, this is all within a matter of maybe 5-10 minutes.
Ooh, this is good. Oh, this is good.
That is a cool looking episode of The List. Jesse and Patrick always have a lot of fun. You got to check out this video. Watch the whole thing. Best thing to do with these episodes of the List, is, you know, get home from work, pull them up on your phone, crack your favorite beverage, throw in some popcorn. These are worth watching. You got to check them out. So that's the latest episode of The List. We hope you enjoy it. Moving on to the question of the week. This is where I think we try and sort of analyze some of the issues, higher level, meta things, try and figure out what's going on here. Question of the week, are cars getting too fast? What do you think, Joel?
Well, this is something that I've been wrestling with for a little bit lately, or well, more than a little bit. And it's come up, especially having had some cars in the office recently, like the CTS-V, our GT350 that we had recently. And actually, we've got a Trackhawk this week, too. And the thing about them, like when I've been driving them, and don't get me wrong, I like horsepower, but these cars are so fast and so capable that it can almost be hard to have fun with them on public streets. I mean, like that CTSV, when I was cruising on the highway, I could easily do like 30 over in just a couple seconds, and it wouldn't even feel like it was trying. And it's cool, but I'm also like, I'm going to be facing a huge fine or go to jail if I do this often.
I agree with you. It's, it's probably been that way for a while. I mean, since basically the turn of this century, it went from like, you couldn't get a car with 300 horsepower. The Mustang had like that old 4-liter engine they had in it, that V6, that was like this strangled, thing. And now it's like, I mean, you get Camrys that could outgun like old school Camaros. And this is a good thing. Are they getting too fast? I am going to say they are, just because there's no use for them. It's like, what do you do with a car like the Bugatti Chiron or, some of those, Hennessy things, the Venom? Like, and these are exaggerations, but like, the Demon or the Hellcat, those are Challengers in their basic form. What do you really need a Hellcat for? I don't know. And it's not just the Challengers. It's, basically every car is a top speed of usually over 100 miles an hour, unless you're buying some like, strangled 80s hatchback thing. And the reality is you probably don't need it. Now, I don't think every car is getting too fast. I think for that specialized niche of consumers who want these like really capable, really performance-oriented cars that you're going to drive around and then take to, Monticello on the weekends or something, yeah, more power to you, quite literally. But, I think we're reaching a time where, like, you don't need to have the press release or the advertisement that says 215 miles an hour or 162 miles an hour or whatever they say for these cars. Do I think it's going to go back anytime soon? Probably not. Not unless, because there's no reason to do it. You can still make a fuel-efficient car that could go 150 miles an hour. I mean, you could go 140 or 50 miles an hour in almost any car anyway. You'd get 40 miles to the gallon. So, it's one of those issues where I think we're past the point of no return. Yeah.
And like you were saying, we were giving like some kind of ridiculous examples, but even like less ridiculous examples. We had a 911 GTS in the office recently, and that's not the craziest performance thing in the world. I mean, it's quick, but it's not earth-shattering fast. But even that, like, it felt bored, and I felt bored driving in normal traffic with it, because I knew that this can go much faster and would be much happier going faster. And the other thing is that I know that cars with a lot less power can be as much fun or more fun in traffic. And as cliche as it is, our long-term Miata was that way. It had enough power to like get up to speed fairly quickly, and it was all in the mid-range, so you had this torque whenever you wanted it, and so it actually felt quick. It was geared short to take advantage of that. I mean, you could even break that thing loose pretty easily and like still be like under the speed limit, under control, super safe. Yeah, I mean, slower cars can be fun. Now, also to your point, I do agree that not all cars are too powerful. There are cars that are too underpowered.
Exactly.
I know that back when I was driving the XV Crosstrek on the press drive, it's a great car, but it's really slow.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing too, is like, it depends on what you're going to do with the car. If you're a hardcore enthusiast and you have a great commute that's fairly open back roads, yeah, get an ATS-V. That's what I do. If, you're somewhere like you're just driving around town, yeah, the Crosstrek probably gets it done if you're only on surface streets. But, I mean, I think most of us do need a little bit of, just capability. You want to feel comfortable accelerating onto the expressway. And, a car like that Subaru feels a little too slow. That's the kind of thing where you should test drive it. You're going to go to the dealer. You want to see how cars like this drive before you actually buy one. And you're like, oh, geez, man, this is slow. What was I thinking, So, yeah, test drive your cars. There are cars that are too slow. If you're in the market for a car, check out our Car Finder. Lots of cool things there, too. So that is the question of the week. I think we come back to our cars getting too fast. Basically, our answer is yes. Questions from the audience. It doesn't look like we have too many people who are interested, but we do have one Autoblog fan who's curious about cars from the 1990s. what car from the 1990s, like, the Impala, the Bronco, the Ranger, would you like to bring back? And some of these cars lingered well on even into a few years ago. But, when you look back to the 90s, Full House, TGIF, all that good stuff, what car from that era do you think would be a good time to come back?
We're talking about what car we would want to come back, or which would be good to bring back, because that can be be different things.
Either one. My answer is pretty simple actually. It's the Impala SS. I love that car. I think it was 94 to 96. It looked great. Well, some people might not say it looked great, but I think the design actually did hold up pretty well. Had a Corvette engine, stiffer suspension. That car is awesome in so many ways. There's literally no business case for it right now. The sports sedans we were talking about earlier, there is a niche business case for those kind of vehicles. There's like literally no business case for a sports sedan that's based on a mass market car that the police also use and taxi cab drivers used. It was a different time. Cheers, I don't know. Totally different time.
Norm.
Exactly.
I think the car that I'd like to see come back would be the RX-7.
Good one.
I love the third generation one. It's gorgeous. It's really held up. It's svelte. It's athletic. It's very curvy. It's got really elegant lines. But it was also an awesome performer. Handled really great. The twin turbo rotary was really cool. And like your Impala SS, there's basically no business case for something like that. It was thirsty, it was expensive, and it would probably be that way today if it was rotary engined. I'm not saying that I wouldn't like to see the rotary engine come back. I'd love to see that, but that's a really tough thing to do nowadays, unless they do like the range extended hybrid that has been suggested.
That would be cool. I think that's what you're seeing right now is, car companies are kind of dipping into these old school names, but they're using them on like very cutting edge technology laden vehicles. The idea is, put your best foot forward. I don't know. Mazda's always making rumblings about what they're going to do. Plenty of news out of them, out of Tokyo. RX-7 would be awesome. Speaking of money, though, that we need to spend, Joel would probably want to throw one on an RX-7. We're going to spend some other people's money rather than on fruitless cars from the 90s. Michael writes in, he is an owner of a 2010 Chevy HHR. That's going back. That was an old car even in 2010.
Yeah, and it looked like an even older car.
It did. It looked a little bit like a PT Cruiser, some would say. Yeah. Okay, so his budget is all in 50 to 60 grand, so he's got some coin to spend here. He comes from a GM family. Family has owned a Camaro, Grand Prix, G8, Bonnevilles, Impalas. So he's got some interesting taste here. I kind of like it. Basically, what he needs is something where he can show up in business. Clients are going to see him. He needs to look good. So he is a, 30 years old, single, white-collar, outdoorsy gentleman. What is going to fit his needs? That also include camping, hunting, and, generally living life.
Yeah, so I was thinking about that. And I think, didn't he say that he's got a couple cars that he's been thinking about?
He does. Here's what's on his radar. Excellent point. 2017 Chevy SS, which came to mind right when I saw that list of GM, lineage that he was considering in his head. He's got the 1718 Outback, very practical. 17 Lincoln Continental, looks great in front of clients. It does. Or a W15 workhorse pickup that's not even out for consumers.
Yeah, there's
good choices.
Part of me would like to say go get the Chevy SS. If you loved it, you should get it, especially before they run out. But I also know that might not be the greatest on like dirt roads and stuff to get to campsites. I was kind of thinking that maybe looking at an Audi A4 all-road might be a good way to go.
Yeah.
It's like an Outback, but way nicer interior, better performance. I'd say it looks a lot better too, and it would definitely be impressive to clients. I mean, you've got this classy Audi, but it's also not like a stuffy kind of traditional German sports sedan that looks like a lawyer or banker drives it. It's a little bit more rugged.
I think that actually is going to something like that. I was thinking something German might actually be the right play here, because you kind of like you need that sort of quattro all-wheel drive for these weekend adventures. Yeah, I don't think an SS is going to help you camping very much. That thing's pretty squirrely on pavement, let alone take it off road. Outback gets you done, but you definitely lose the wow factor there. Like I don't think clients are gonna see an Outback roll up and, get excited and open their checkbooks. They're great cars. They just aren't particularly, snazzy.
And they're not exactly fun to drive. They're not bad to drive, but they're not going to like get your blood pumping.
Continental, I'd say of all the things you've listed here, is probably the most practical because I believe you can get it with all-wheel drive. I'm pretty sure you can. It looks really good. So you're definitely presenting, a very sophisticated look to consumers. You don't see that many of them on the road. So I think, you pull up in a Continental, especially if you've got customers who might even be a little bit older, not to play into the Lincoln stereotype, but the Continental name means a lot to certain people of a certain age and to younger people who maybe have never seen a Lincoln Continental. It's a different thing. That's kind of cool. They'll just be like, oh, that's a really nice car. So as I look at your choices here, that's probably the best of the four that I think you've thrown on here. To try and get all of the things that you've thrown into this little soup, I would probably have to go with the A4 All-Road. I think your choice is very well-rounded. The other thing, though, here, too, is if you've got the money, I don't know, maybe you love the SS. This is where I like to kind of just play into your worst instincts. Like if you test drove it, you love it, and you're writing to us, and you kind of want us to just confirm it. It's like when you go to the doctor, and you're like, am I okay? They're like, well, you need a tourniquet, and you don't look good. You want them to say everything's okay. If you want the SS, you should get the SS, because it's an awesome car. Chevy's never going to make another car like this until, like, things like this come back into fad into, like, I don't know, 2030. I mean, if that's what you want, you should totally get it. Any other ideas, though?
Yeah, actually, I've got one, and I also came up with another one off the top of my head.
This is his game.
It is. One of them, I would maybe take a look at the Porsche Macan.
Sure.
The GTS
Good
one
idea.
is really potent, and it's a great driving car. It's got that little extra bit of ground clearance. It's all-wheel drive.
You could take that hunting and camping.
It's practical. It's got space, and it would definitely impress your clients. It's a Porsche. The other thing that just crossed my mind, if you like the Chevy SS, maybe look at a Chevy Tahoe.
Interesting. Interesting.
And especially the upcoming, I think it's the RST package, because that one comes with the bigger V8, and it also has like an exhaust on it. It comes with bigger brakes, and you can even get it with the magnetic ride suspension.
That's true. That would be a fun one to drive. I love the Tahoe. I think they're great. I have camped in them. I've slept in them. I didn't even bother to unpack the tent because why would you do that? You have a Tahoe. Like you can put 5 people in it and a dog. There's plenty of room. That's a really good idea. And those are your options. I think the Macan is another intriguing choice. I think that's actually better than the A4 All-Road. That's an ace comment right there because you don't see many of them on the road. Porsche trumps Audi. You get some functionality. It looks cooler than an all-road, which has like kind of plastic wrapped around it. That could be the play.
Yeah, I'd even say it looks better than the Cayenne too.
Yeah, that's debatable, but yeah, that would fit right in the budget. And yeah, I think what you've got here is your good angel, which is Joel, who's like on one shoulder saying, "Here's your good options. You can do this," and then you've got Devil Greg here saying SS. So I think Macan or, maybe the SS or that Continental is pretty good too. So those are our sort of indecisive choices, but there's some pretty good ones. And we're glad you're listening, Michael. We're glad you're writing into us. Let us know how it goes. We'll talk about it again on the air. If you really want to give us some follow-ups and stuff, hey, maybe we can give you some more advice. And hopefully it's a little better than this advice. But Michael, thanks for watching and listening. To the rest of you, thanks for watching and listening. That was Autoblog podcast number 531. Have a great week, and remember to come back tomorrow for our special Tokyo Motor Show live edition.